when you look at Britain in the last 20 years, sadly, the story is one in which the engine driving improving living standards just isn't working. And people now are not much better off than they were 20 years ago as a whole. Of course, individuals, as they go through their lives, get better off. But for any given age, not much of an improvement in living standards. So it's very important and topical to find out what's going wrong, who's particularly hit by the poor performance of living standards, and how they can be helped.
Do you think that the living standards have got worse and that maybe the Resolution Foundation hasn't achieved what it wanted over those 20 years?
Well, certainly we wish that things had gone a lot better. I mean, the turning point was the financial crash of 2008. And it's since then that Britain has underperformed. Now, there are elaborate reasons for that. I mean, I think part of the story is we were so heavily into financial services that a crash that hit financial services was going to be particularly bad for our economy. But since then, we've also had policy measures that I think have made things worse. And look, I served in the coalition cabinet, but when you look at things like what's happened to benefits for families have, if anything, lost value, fallen in real terms, whereas benefits for pensioners have increased above inflation. And, it's nice that we can provide that increase in benefits for pensioners, but as there's a limited amount of money to go around, what it's meant is that the Social Security budget has shifted to older people at the expense of particularly families with children. So we analyse problems like that, as well as the underlying economic drivers of prosperity.
And I think one thing that stands out from your book, The Pinch, and the conversations that you have and the research is that basically there was this idea that being in a big cohort was a disadvantage. And what we've actually found is it's been a significant advantage to boomers. And that it's not necessarily malicious, it's just if you can shape the landscape, the economic, political landscape, you will. I do think as well that from a younger perspective, people imply that boomers just hopped onto this ride straight up, but they had their rough moments as well, didn't they? The 70s, the 90s, the early 90s, people were clinging onto their homes with their fingertips, so there's nuance, isn't there?
Yeah, and look, and I get, of course, whenever I do things like your podcast, I will get emails from older people saying, look, my life was very tough and I've scrimped and saved. And of course, those are absolutely valid individual stories. And the there's been economic cycle and boom and bust. But overall, it has been quite favourable. And so even though, we had times of high inflation and high interest rates, we also had much easier terms for borrowing and getting started on the housing and taking out a mortgage. So I think overall, it has worked for the age group, that post-war age group, and the evidence is overwhelming. It's still working. And if I can give you just one fact from us at Resolution Foundation that we've calculated, that if you look just at the value of benefits, what's happened to them since 2010, and you can see that for pensioners, they've gone up by 60%, up by £900. For working age families, they've gone up by 30%, which actually is less than inflation. So there are things like that where there have been policy decisions that have favoured the boomers.
That was a clip from our full-length conversation with Lord David Willetts. He's the president of the Resolution Foundation. You can watch the full interview right here.